You're listening to the Pure Fury Creations Entertainment Network. The views and opinions expressed on this episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or philosophies of the PFC Entertainment Network or any of the affiliates that make this show possible. This show has also been rated M for mature audiences only. This is Creepy Soup on the PFC Entertainment Network.
Hello, welcome to episode 112. I think it is. Yeah, 112.
That's what I have in my notes.
And if you listen to last week's episode, you heard Jenny make the announcement that she was stepping away for a little bit to deal with some family issues. So this week, Jason has been kind enough to fill in. So welcome to the show.
It's kind of weird being in this seat. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so used to being the one that's calling the shots here. It's almost like letting your kid take control of the car while you're sitting in the passenger seat. You know what I mean? It's kind of the dynamic. But listen, this is an absolute privilege for me. Because you guys. I listen to you guys every week on, while I'm at work and stuff like that. And
thank you.
Appreciate what you guys are bringing to the table here at the network, and it's resonating. So to be able to kind of, sit in this seat for this week, and especially for the topic we're going to talk about, the pleasure's all on this side of the camera, dear. I don't mind telling you.
Well, I appreciate it. And when Jenny and I had talked about stepping away, like, this was my first thought because we had briefly spoke about this, covering this before. So my first thought was, let's do it. And Jason, with no hesitation, said absolutely. So
no, there was no hesitation, because this is, especially with your guys' genre that you tackle here on Creepy Soup. When I think of that genre, true crime and things of this nature, and being who I am and what I've done, this is always the first thing that comes to mind, because it is one of the more controversial topics that doesn't span just the genre of true crime, but this is like pop culture, sports, entertainment. This is where the very real and ugly side of professional wrestling is exposed. And for your listeners who don't know who I am or don't know my affiliation, just to kind of give a backstory in terms of what I'm bringing to the table with this topic. I spent 28 years in the professional wrestling business. I was a promoter. I was a performer. On an independent level. I didn't work for WWE or WCW or any of the big names. I formed my own promotion and ran it for almost 30 years. So I know what the hell I'm talking about here. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a unique perspective with what we're going to talk about, and my vision, and why I feel the way I do about all of this as this story unfolds.
this is like the perfect crossover. Boom.
It really is.
Perfect.
You've been on with us for Power
Mhm.
Tripping through the 80s with Sean and I, and that was a cool crossover because we looked at the horror movies of the 80s. So for me to do this, to come over, like, I don't know if I've ever been really a part of a crossover on somebody else's show on the
Right.
network like this. You know what I mean? So it's really cool. It's a it's a different approach for sure.
Yeah. So I know I had briefly touched on it in a quick little message on Facebook Messenger to you one day. And I thought I had maybe brought this up, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I ever did. So I'm like, I messaged you the one night. I'm like, did I ever tell you that well, he was actually my dad's cousin, um, Joe Smith, who was a professional wrestler. He wrestled under a couple names. The one I remember my parents talking about the most was Bulldog Don Kent.
Hmm.
And now I don't know what the storyline or anything was because obviously that was way before my time. But I know he was friends, like real life personal friends with Leap and Larry Shane. Um, shit, I should have probably asked my brother some questions. And I do know that there was many Sundays that my grandma hosted all of them for dinner.
I remember
So,
you telling me that, and as you were describing that, I was sitting there thinking, what did that scene look like? You know what I
right.
mean? Like that, you can only imagine when especially back in that day. You're talking, some of the pioneers that laid the groundwork for what wrestling is here. You mentioned Leaping Larry Shane, Bobo Brazil can be thrown in there,
Hmm.
Dick the Bruiser. You can enjoy, especially around this area, this part of the country when wrestling was very much in a territory system.
Hmm.
Every piece of real estate, we'll call it, they had their own promotion, and you did not cross lines. Well, until Vince McMahon came around and took the whole thing not just national but worldwide. Um,
Right.
so I can only, that's really cool that you have that tie to that side of the business. I really
Yeah.
appreciated that story.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. Like, I can remember, like, when my parents would talk about it when I was younger, it was just so nonchalant, like not a big deal. And then as I got older and realized what they were talking about, because by that time I was watching wrestling, I'm like, holy shit.
Hmm.
It was just really cool to hear. And then, like I said, as I got older, understood like what they were talking about, like having these people over and my grandma cooked the meals and stuff. It was just cool to hear. And I know my older brother would know more of the names because there was several names thrown in there that would go to my grandma's house for dinner. I just don't
So,
remember them all.
having seen that dynamic, did it affect the way that you watched it on TV when you're seeing good guys versus bad guys, and the people, some of the guys that were sitting around the dining room table could have been the biggest heels in the business at that time, but they're
Right,
coming here and breaking bread with you. You know what I
right.
mean? So was that like the mind fuck?
Well,
Because that
it
would
kind
have been
of
for
was
me.
because I'm like, they're probably going out to dinner after this
Hmm.
or going out for a drink or two. Well, as a kid, I didn't really think drink or two, but they're probably going to dinner. Maybe they're going to his grandma's house
Right.
and they're great. Like, so that did come up a few times when, and like my mom would say something like, yeah, they're probably best friends in real life. And then, you hear some of those episodes and hear how those people actually were on a friendly basis outside of their storylines and things like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
back in the day, there was a word called kayfabe, and that was you lived your gimmick.
Hmm.
Back then, like the good guys, which were baby faces, and bad guys, which were heels,
Hmm.
had to dress in separate locker rooms in case fans or building personnel or whoever, they couldn't see them talking, working out a match, and then walking out and beating the shit out of each other. You know,
Right.
that shit's been long gone. Like that doesn't happen anymore, and I blame the internet for a big portion of that because everybody
Yeah.
needs to know everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Kind of ruin that aspect of the business. But and we're kind of laying the groundwork for it, what we're going to talk about here. But I want your listeners who you know may not be in the know or don't have a base or a better understanding, um, because people will dismiss pro wrestling. It's fake. I'm here to fucking tell you it's among the most real things in terms of entertainment because we have no stunt doubles. If I'm getting body slammed, I'm taking the bump. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? We don't stop midway through and throw another guy up in that dude's arms and he takes the bump. That shit don't happen. But
Right.
it's all glitz and glamour in front of the camera, man. But behind the scenes, it is very cutthroat. It is very it's a culture unlike anything else in this world. There is a brotherhood, there is a camaraderie
Hmm.
that is it's unmatched, and I'll put it up against any major sports franchise locker room. You know what I mean? Because everybody's under one banner, but it's very individualized. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Not where like a football team, you're all on one team for one goal. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? But with players coming and going, you don't really have that close knit bond that you do find in professional wrestling nowadays,
Right.
and that's why. And then there's the fan base. The fan base for professional wrestling, I will go ahead and say, is the most rabid and loyal of anything. NASCAR is up there. Make no
Yeah.
mistake.
Oh, for sure.
NASCAR fans are very, very faithful, very faithful. And I'm not dismissing that. I'm not necessarily a NASCAR fan, but I appreciate what it is. I truly
Right.
do. It's a sport, no shit.
Yeah. And
There's no doubt
see, and
about
that
it.
was another one by default. I
Hmm.
started watching and had a favorite driver and all that stuff. Actually, once he retired, I was like, I don't even give a shit now. Um, but
Was it
I'm
Dale Jr.?
no,
Oh,
I know I was a Rusty Wallace fan.
okay, all right, yeah.
I was a Rusty Wallace fan. Yep. Did you watch wrestling as a kid?
Jill, wrestling came across my radar in 1983, and I haven't stopped watching it since.
Okay,
Virtually
so
all my life.
as a kid, who was your favorite wrestler?
Hulk Hogan. Yeah. But I mean, he was my all-time favorite, and especially nowadays, people mean, "Oh my God," because Hogan is just so polarizing now. But
Mm,
a lot of by his own doing, I don't mind telling you. But be that as it may, the very first wrestlers that I saw that got my attention were the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom.
okay.
With
Okay. Yep.
the mohawks, the face paint, the spiked shoulder pads. These were real life superheroes, and they went into this ring and beat the fuck out of these two dudes. That was
Hmm.
my very first match. I saw it on a Saturday afternoon at Jason Hansen's house. I'll never
Okay.
forget it. That next week, um, that next weekend, I introduced my brother to it. I'm like, dude, I saw this thing on TV. We gotta find it. We found it, but it wasn't the Road Warriors. We found Hulk Hogan, and
Okay.
it was at the very beginning of Hulkamania in the WWF. He had just won the world title, and like we were right there, almost on day one, and watched his meteoric rise to
Hmm.
pop
Yep.
culture. So, he was everywhere, and I have never. When I saw that, I swear to God, Joe, a lot of people be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to be a cop, or I want to be a firefighter. I'm going to be a professional wrestler, and I never fucking wavered. I didn't go to college after high school. I went to wrestling school, much to the dismay of my parents. But that's how goddamn focused I was. I was going to the WWF. That's all I cared about. Um, Along my journey, I realized that was not going to be a thing. So instead of just packing it up, I came back home and opened what would become the Michigan Wrestling Organization.
Yeah,
And
you made it
in that
happen.
time, and I helped launch. I no, I don't want to say that. I provided a platform, a stage for hundreds of men and women of all ages to take step one into their dreams of being involved in the wrestling business. And I look back on that with a lot of pride, you know. But
Oh, and
everything
you
I did
should.
there set me up for this. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Mhm.
And I talk more about that on my flagship show on Tuesdays here on the network. But yeah, wrestling has very much been who and what I am for sure.
Yep. See, and my brothers were the same way. Well, both brothers liked wrestling, but one was into wrestling. Um, him and his friend, they would go with the friend's mom to Joanne Fabrics and get like the vinyl, and they would get poster board, and they made their own belts. And I mean, of course, they were like fake vinyl and poster board, but they were very artistic in the way they made them. And they would have wrestling matches. We At our house, we didn't have a backyard. We had like this much of a backyard when we were younger. So all wrestling matches happened in the front yard, and I was out there too. I mean, being the only girl, you if you and there was no other girls in my neighborhood, so I only had my brothers and their friends to play with. And so I was out there playing football and being body slammed and all kinds of shit. Like, they didn't care that I was a girl. I didn't care.
I was just going to say, did it bother you? It was just another day, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was out there,
that's
had
awesome.
fun.
That's all that matters.
Very good memories
Yeah,
from childhood. Yeah.
that's awesome for sure. Well, listen, I mean, we kind of laid the groundwork here. We're going to be talking about Chris Benoit, and when Jill, this is one of those names that when you hear it, you're going to get one reaction or the other. You know,
Mm,
when we were talking a little bit off air, I likened it to the political landscape that we've seen here in the last handful of years, but specifically right here now, because it's just in our face.
right.
You get hardcore supporters on one side or the other. Um, this is that topic in professional wrestling, just because of the sensitive nature of and speculation and just a lot of question marks that surround this.
Yeah, and and I know I did had mentioned, because I can't remember what day we talked about this. Was it Tuesday afternoon? I think it was last week.
I think so. Tuesday or Wednesday. Yeah.
Um, and so we had already had this planned and in the works. And what day was that? Friday. Kevin Sullivan passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, that is crazy. The timing was was something.
So about that, and this is no shit because of what you just like. We did talk earlier in the week, and we were preparing in the event that Jenny wasn't able to be here this week. We were coming up with Plan B, so there wasn't a hiccup in the drop dates and stuff. And when I got up on Friday, because I had Fatal Four Way on ONTV Friday night, and when I had gotten up, and I had my notes written, I had sent the graphics over to the studio, like I was set, and that was one of the first things that came across my radar. And when it registered, like, damn, Kevin Sullivan passed away, and then I thought about, holy shit, I'm going on Creepy Soup this week to talk about Benoit, and how fucking ironic is that?
Yeah,
Is it
that
is
was
a
my first thought.
coincidence? Yeah, it could be a coincidence. It's not like, but I'm also a sign guy, and I'm not dismissing that for what it is.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, I thought you were talking about Chris Benoit. Who the fuck is Kevin Sullivan? Why does he matter? You're fixing to find out why he matters.
Hmm.
and what his tie-ins with this. I don't know. Do you want me to just kind of run down the story here? Because I don't want to take your show over. Um, what's the best way you want me to tackle this?
Just go ahead.
So the league lays some of the groundwork on Chris Benoit. He was a Canadian-born wrestler. Um, got a lot of his early notoriety overseas, in Japan, and wrestled under a few different gimmicks. He was trained. Um, he trained with the Hearts. He trained with Tatsumi Fujinami, some of the icons of
Hmm.
the sport. Over time, he would adopt this move set that was mimicking that of the Dynamite Kid, who was a legend in the WWF as one half of the British Bulldogs with Davey Boy Smith.
Hmm.
But he was real popular in Japan, real popular in Europe, real popular in Canada. And they were built the same. Benoit looked up to him. He was his idol, his role model, and very much patterned his in ring arsenal around what the Dynamite Kid did. There are videos on YouTube to see just how close Benoit was able to adopt those move sets. They do like side by sides,
Hmm.
and it's like watching, like looking into a fucking mirror. It is. Chris Benoit was one of the most disciplined and underappreciated wrestlers in his time. The dude could bump like nobody's business. He was so technically sound, knew holds and moves and counters and that people hadn't even thought of yet. You know what I mean? Like he was
Hmm.
just such a master of the mat. He really truly was. And because he was of smaller stature, 5'11", around the 225-pound mark, he was able to go off the top rope and do some of the more aerial assaults. So he was like the total package. He was, built like a shit brick house, strong beyond all get out, but he was light enough still to be able to take to the air. Like people had him pegged as somebody to keep an eye on. But because he was under 6 feet tall, it was assumed that he would never get a shot with the World Wrestling Federation or World Wrestling Entertainment as it's known now, because that's the land of the giants. You have your Hogans, then you had, back in the day, you had Andre the Giant, Big John Studd. In more recent years, you had the Big Show. Guys that were 6'5" plus,
Right.
300 plus pounds. You know what I mean? Benoit did not fit that bill. But during this time, and we're going into the mid to the late '90s, the internet started to become a thing. So what used to be what was called tape trading, people would have matches and shit taped on VHS tapes and literally send them to people all over the world, and they would swap tape. That's how you got to know international superstars if they weren't covered in wrestling magazines. Wrestling
Okay.
magazines were still a very big thing back in the day. Not so much anymore. I think there's only a handful of them that's left, because everything has gone digital. Everything has gone to the World Wide Web.
Hmm.
We didn't have YouTube back then. That's how I came. That's how Chris Benoit came across my radar. I tape traded a tape of ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, which was trying to become the number 3 promotion in the United States behind the WWF and WCW. Paul Heyman, who a lot of fans nowadays know as like manager of the Bloodline and Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, he owned ECW. He was the actual owner of that, and he brought in all these different talents from around the world. Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko were among them, and what these three are going to become lifelong friends.
Hmm.
They will follow each other from ECW to WCW and ultimately to WWE. Um, Benoit, now this is where Kevin Sullivan comes into play. Um, when Benoit goes to World Championship Wrestling, Kevin Sullivan, who is also an in-ring performer, was what was called the booker. He was the one that wrote the scripts to the shows. He was the one that was kind of dictating who was going to wrestle who and how this, he was writing the storyline, for the lack of a
Mhm.
better term. In real life, Kevin Sullivan was married to a woman named Nancy. Nancy became part of the show, and Jill blew my mind in the crosstalk when she recalled her first gimmick name in WCW, which was
Robin Green.
Robin Green. And she would eventually become the valet known as Woman. And when she made that transition from the nerdy girl type to, you likened it to Sandy from Grease,
Yep.
the black leather and the makeup, and there's a perfect analogy for it. Um, she became part of the show, but in real life
Mhm.
she was married to the booker, Kevin Sullivan. It is Sullivan's idea. This is where it starts getting fucked up. In the twist of irony here, Sullivan writes a storyline where his rival, Chris Benoit, winds up winning Sullivan's wife. They wind up having like some sort of quote unquote affair, and it would lead to this match, this blow off match later on in the year. What Sullivan didn't take into consideration is that this shit played out in real life too.
Mhm.
Um, Nancy winds up leaving Sullivan to be with Benoit, and they're still employed by the same company, and Sullivan is still writing Benoit's material. You see the conflict here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Obviously, on the surface, this is bad news. And the one thing that, as a sidebar, he talked about this on his podcast some time back. Arn Anderson, who was one of the Four Horsemen and
Mhm.
a longtime WCW wrestler and agent, um, pulls Benoit's side and says, "This is not what you want to do. Kevin Sullivan is not the one to fuck with," because Kevin Sullivan had a legit reputation of being batshit crazy, devil worshiper. Just like he was one of the most intelligent people in the business, but he was also one of the most low key feared because people didn't know what his true mentals. He worked the boys
Mhm.
so much, and that's part of his brilliance is he didn't know, the guys in the locker room didn't know how to take him. Is this dude really? Oh, because he lived the gimmick, and
Mhm.
he was very, very much into his gimmick. And if you go back and watch his shit from Florida, that's his whole persona. He was the devil on
Mhm.
Earth, and people thought that was really him because that's how he portrayed himself. And
Yeah.
to this day, we don't know if that was really. I mean, those who really truly know him, I'm sure, have a better idea than I do. But there was that fear aspect. But how fucked up is this, Jill, when you are the writer and you're writing the storyline that involves your wife and a colleague, and real life is following what's happening on the show? I couldn't even imagine what that would what that would do to a person. You see what I'm saying? But the fact that they were
Yeah, that
still able, even when all this shit was going on, they still had their blow off match. And yeah, I mean, they laid it in, man. They beat the fuck out of each other.
oh,
But
I
there
can
was
imagine.
still, but there was still that sense of respect, which is, from my perspective, I'm like, damn, that is truly putting the business in front and putting your personal shit aside and doing what's good for the business,
Right.
because there was this so much time and effort put into the storyline. After that, um, you could see the writing on the wall where Sullivan was not going to be booking Benoit very favorably.
Right.
During the course, a long series of actions, and we won't have to get into all that, but storyline wise and the behind the scenes politics, eventually Chris Benoit, along with Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn, four of the biggest names in WCW, were granted their releases, and they all went to what was the WWF at the time. This was in 2000, January of 2000. They
Okay.
go to the WWF, and Benoit would go on to split from this group and embark on his own career, ultimately winning the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 20 in 2004, the pinnacle of all pinnacles. Um, he also, multiple tag team titles, intercontinental title. Like the dude has won over 30 titles across his career. And in the meantime, became known as one of the greatest in-ring wrestlers in the business at that time. You were saying his name in the same breath as Bret the Hitman Hart, as Ric Flair, as Kurt Angle, as guys that were actual, you believed what they were doing. You know
Right.
what I mean? They were able to suspend disbelief. They were able to get you involved in the story. And what Benoit lacked in charisma, because his promos were not all that great. He wasn't a super imposing guy, but when that bell rang, it like that's how he told his story, was during the actual wrestling matches. So he had this reputation of being first ballot Hall of Famer. This dude's name is going to be etched in a lot of Mount Rushmores in
Yeah.
terms of his in-ring ability. So nobody really prepared. Nobody could prepare for what came in June of 2007, and to this day, all these years later, there's a lot of wrestling fans that were paying attention to all this shit in real time as it unfolded. And we sit here in 2024 and be like, how is this even fucking real? How could this even be a thing? Um, Chris Benoit, according to reports, during a 3-day period, killed his wife, his son, and then himself in one of the most personally charged episodes of murder suicide that's been recorded in quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Just the nature of how things were alleged, and I say alleged because I mean, I understand that there are, as far as the authorities are concerned, and this is what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Open and
Um,
shut for sure. That's
yeah.
how they looked at it.
But there's just so many other question marks and so many other things that were unresolved with this, and a lot of speculation. Um, the first signs of issue were they were the WWE were setting up for a pay-per-view that weekend on Sunday, June the 24th, an event called Vengeance. And on Friday, the Friday before, Benoit started sending some weird text messages to Chavo Guerrero, who was the nephew of Eddie Guerrero. And I guess I should back up here a little bit. Eddie Guerrero was Benoit's best friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he passed away very suddenly, unexpectedly in 2005 while they were at on the road for a tour.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie passed away, and a lot of people, Chavo included, pinpoints that day as the things started going downhill for Benoit, who really took Eddie's passing so so incredibly hard, to the point to where um, Vicky Guerrero, Eddie's widow, tells a story that a few months after Eddie's passing, Benoit was becoming inconsolable, really having these real deep, dark bouts of depression and trying to cope with the fact that his friend has passed away, to the point to where Benoit would go to Guerrero's house and lay on Eddie's side of the bed and lay there and cry.
Cry.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And on some level, I can understand where that kind of grief comes from. You know,
Hmm.
I liken that to what I deal with, with losing my brother. But can I just tell you this? At no point during my grieving process have I ever thought about going to his wife's house and laying on his side of the bed. You
Right.
see what I'm saying? And it affected him on that level. You know, were you going to say something? I didn't want to
No,
interrupt.
no.
Oh, um, so that's kind of, you're starting to see the seeds for something bad is fixing to happen, and then we get
Yeah.
to the weekend of the pay-per-view, and during the course of that, it started out with some random weird ass text messages. I think Edge also had gotten one or two messages, to the point to where there was no longer communication. We get to Sunday, and nobody knows anything. They haven't heard anything. Benoit is scheduled to be on this card, scheduled to win the vacant ECW World Championship at this show, because they haven't heard from him. Other than one of the text messages was, "I'm not going to make it to the town on Saturday because Nancy and Daniel are sick." That's what
Yeah,
it
they had
was.
food poisoning. He
Yes.
said they had food poisoning.
Um, it is speculated that at this point Nancy is already dead
Hmm.
when he had sent that message out, because apparently he winds up killing Nancy on Friday, Daniel on Saturday, and then himself on Sunday. Is what a lot of the reports had had said.
Hmm.
Um, so from the show perspective, they're scrambling to rewrite the show. Meanwhile, Vince McMahon um, winds up calling or making the arrangements to send the authorities over to Benoit's for a welfare check, and that's when they find what they find. Um, Nancy was wrapped up in a blanket with a Bible laying next to her. Um, Daniel, this is the part that fucks me up. Daniel was a special needs child,
Hmm.
and that kid didn't have a fucking chance.
Mm-mm.
Uh, Elevated amounts of Xanax found in his system when they did the autopsy, so the kid was sedated before being choked out by his fucking father. Again, allegedly. Again, a Bible laying next to him. Benoit lived in that house for 2 days with his wife and his son, and ultimately winds up rigging up his lap machine in his home gym to hang himself. Now, when we get news of this, it's not until Monday, the Monday after.
Hmm.
Um, Monday Night Raw is their weekly live television show, and they had a show booked for Monday night that was going to, tie into the pay per view the night before. Um, Upon word of this, the Fayetteville police winds up calling Bruce Pritchard with WWE and explains as much as they could, but relayed the fact that the Benoit family is deceased, has been found dead in their home.
Hmm.
What we got in terms of news was Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, his son Daniel are found dead in their Georgia home. Immediately, everybody started pointing the finger and looking for Kevin Sullivan
Yep.
because of things that Sullivan had either said or written or alluded to, and given the nature of their real life breakdown, um, he was suspect number one because people automatically assumed that he went to their house and wiped them all out. I was one of those people because we were very aware. It was no, it had be almost become the stuff of urban legend.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
hatred between these two. Um, so when we heard that, that's immediately where we went to. Like, oh, somebody better be, somebody better be going to find Sullivan, and then we assume, well, they're going to find him dead too. It was
Yeah.
that's your mind goes that way because there's no way that one of our heroes or one of the guys that we grew up watching could be responsible for this.
Right.
The news was still very shaky. So what WWE winds up doing, they canceled that show. They put out a massive press release and told everybody, do not come to the arena. And I don't know if they rescheduled it or offered immediate refunds. But the show goes on the air live, and there stands in the middle the middle of the ring. There's shit still set up. The ring's set up, the stage is set up, everything's set up. Not one person is in that building. This is before COVID. Okay, so
Hmm.
that's why it was so jarring. There stands Vince McMahon in the middle of the ring. Now the sidebar and ironic part is 2 weeks before all this shit is unfolding, the storyline was McMahon had just gotten blown up in a fucking in the limousine to write himself off TV. Who killed Vince McMahon was the storyline.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So when Raw goes on the air, he's standing in the ring, and he does not know at this point what is being alleged. He
Right.
just knows that one of his guys is dead along with his family. So they wind up doing a 3 hour tribute show with some of his best matches, and those wrestlers who wanted to filmed some testimonials and they
Mm.
spliced them in between the matches. As that show's on the air is when the police department are releasing the details. The next night on ECW TV that McMahon owns, Vince McMahon again is the first person you see, and he says, based on the information that we've got, and because of the heinous nature of these crimes, following my comments here and now, you will never again, and we will never again, acknowledge the man known as Chris Benoit.
Hmm.
In that moment, Vince McMahon single handedly erased Chris Benoit from WWE and ultimately WCW and ECW history because he owns it all. As this starts to unfold, the news is jarring. There's no way this is how this happened. There's no way Chris Benoit murdered his wife. There's no way Chris Benoit murdered his son. No fucking way is this real. But it seemingly is. And then you start hearing more of the details in the days leading up to the text messages and just how weird he was, how withdrawn he had become. And ultimately, um, after his passing, Chris Benoit's father gives permission for doctors and scientists to take Benoit's brain. And among the people who were doing the testing on his brain was a gentleman named Christopher Nowinski, who used to be a WWE superstar and had to quit wrestling because of concussions.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of spearheaded the team that was analyzing Benoit's brain. And what they came out with was the amount of trauma, the amount of abuse that was evident in Benoit's brain likened him to an 80-year-old man.
Yep.
His mentality, steroids found in his system, other miscellaneous substances were alleged to be in the house. Roid rage was, talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I remember hearing that
Um,
one.
and then you saw the news reports. CNN spent a fucking week on this. Larry King Live had a different wrestler or a different wrestling personality every fucking day for a week and a half, and a lot of them, this is what pissed me off. It started to become a witch hunt on Vince McMahon. We're not talking about fucking Vince McMahon here. You know what I'm saying? They're like, well, if Vince McMahon would took better care of his wrestlers, Chris Benoit wouldn't have murdered his family. Are you fist fucking me right now? Are you kidding me right now? Like, it's just, and it was shit like that. But you want to talk about true crime. You want to talk about speculation. You want to talk about all this stuff. It got no more real than in this quote unquote fake world of professional wrestling. And it's something that we still talk about to this day. People have that opinion. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. Should he be celebrated? Should he be erased? There is a line in the sand. There is no
Right.
gray area here. You're either on one side or the other. You see what I'm saying? And
Mm.
can you separate what he did as a professional wrestler versus what he did as a husband and a father? Can people make that separation? Some cannot. Some have not watched the Chris Benoit match since.
Right.
And I told you off air, you go to the history books in that WWE writes, you don't see Benoit's name in the history of the world title. It says Triple H lost the world title at WrestleMania, but it doesn't tell you to who. It says Randy Orton won the world title at SummerSlam, but it doesn't tell you from who. And
Yeah.
it's he will never be in the WWE Hall of Fame. That I do know. There's just no fucking way.
Right.
Um, as a fan, I'm sad because some of the greatest professional wrestling matches that ever took place will never be rewatched. Now his shit's still on like WWE Network, but they put a disclaimer up that says this is presented in its original form, parental discretion advised, based solely because he's on it
Oh
for
wow.
no other reason. And it's it's fucked up, you know. But as a father, I can't imagine hurting my children,
Mm-mm.
letting alone what was alleged here.
Right.
Um, I have a wonderful girlfriend, just the light of my life. Like I can't imagine. I can't imagine yelling at her, let alone killing her. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, God, there's got to be something else. You know what I mean? But Jill, by all intents and purposes, it looks like this is what happened here. You know,
Yeah.
from your perspective, because you haven't been involved in the wrestling business, so you're not going to look at it from my eyes. But from where you sit, How do you see this whole thing?
Um, like it's a sad situation, and I'm one of them people that um when there is actually like no actual proof that like anything physical or anything like that, you know, like no evidence, you know, I try to look at it as like, okay, like was there any sign of forced entry, anything like that, where you know, like maybe someone like Kevin Sullivan could have gotten in and done any of that. So there is always that looking at another angle of what happened, but pretty much anything I've read, I like it does point to Chris Benoit being the one that did it.
Hmm.
Um, but as you know, as I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and I have been pissed at my kids. There have been times I'm
Sure.
like, you know what? And it's a running joke. And many people have heard me say this, including my own kids, because I'm that mom. Like, if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and swallow you because you're giving me a headache right now. But would I ever hurt them? Yeah, I'm that mom, Jason. I'm that
Oh, that
mom.
was phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. I tell them that all the time. Um, but could I like and like they have both my kids, they're adults now. They have both at some point pissed me off to the point where violence could have been the answer. But could I ever see myself doing anything like that? Even my husband, he's a very, for the most part, calm, easygoing, whatever. He might say some shit, but like I couldn't ever picture either one of us doing anything like that. But I have never taken steroids. My husband has never taken steroids, so I can't say like it wouldn't affect somebody like that.
That's the other thing about it, and I'm not dismissing what the research showed when they analyzed his brain, because the dude's finishing maneuver, or one of his finishing maneuvers, was a legitimate headbutt from the fucking top rope. Like, that is a 8 foot fall with, now it wasn't full on contact, make no mistake about it, but he made contact. he
Right.
that's the kind of worker he was. That's the kind of wrestler he was. He may not have done it as hard as he could have done it, but he was fucking doing it. He wanted
Right.
to be, but he wanted people to believe in what he was doing for good reason, because he laid his shit in. Um, 20 years of doing that fallen headbutt, it's going to affect you.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Chair hits.
that's the other thing. And he took some goddamn chair shots, especially in Japan, because they don't. I don't want to say they don't care, but they're not as careful about that kind of shit in Japan as they are here and now. But then too, they didn't have the knowledge back then that we do now either.
Right.
You know, and I'm not sitting here trying to make excuses for the man. If this
No.
is exactly what happened, it, on the surface, this is what happened. This is what he did, and he needs to rot in hell for this.
Right.
And he's not going to be on my Mount Rushmore of much of anything. I do not have any merchandise with him on it. I don't have any action figures of him. You know, even the ones that I did have. It took me a minute. I'm like, do I keep this? Because my dumbass is thinking, how much money are people going to be wanting for this? You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
then I
Yeah.
started feeling like a dick for, am I just trying to make money off of somebody else's tragedy? I don't want to be that, but at the same time, if this piece of plastic is now worth $5,000, what do you do here? You know?
Right. No, I don't know too many people that are going to say no to that. Um but yeah, I mean it is sad. Again, by the time he got onto the scene, I really wasn't watching wrestling, but and one of the things, and we've talked about it, that I watched was Dark Side of the Ring.
Mm,
And to listen to, like, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, watching his son in that, it gets you a little misty eyed because
mm,
there are other victims really besides Nancy and Daniel. There's his son, there's his parents, because yeah, his son did this, he's gone, but so is now their grandchild.
right.
Her parents, um and her sister who was on the show, um that
To be
you know
clear, Benoit's son from a previous marriage, not
yes,
yes.
yes. And now this is something I never knew before, but he also has a daughter. Okay,
I
see,
didn't
I
know
didn't know
that
that.
until very recently.
Yeah, I was looking up things today, um to try to prepare a little better for this. And I was like, a daughter? Like, that was never even mentioned. Like, even in his interviews, like, David never said my sister or our sister. It was, and absolutely the focus should be on Daniel, but at the same time, I, I never knew he had a daughter.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much more that is out there that we don't know about yet. And here's the other thing about Kevin Sullivan, and we talked a little bit about this. I don't think we talked about it on the air. I think it was right before we went on the air on Friday. Kevin Sullivan had made some sort of statement about a month ago about how he held. God damn it! How was it worded? He held a piece of information that would unlock a lot of the mystery of the Benoit thing. And then a month later, he's gone. So we
Mm,
don't know if that was number one real or if he was just working, if he was planting the seed for some sort of bombshell revelation, or if he was just stirring the pot just for the sake of stirring the pot because he knew his time was coming.
right.
You know, his
Now, see, the nosy bitch in me wants to know what that is.
for real. We all do. Like how, and that's what kind of makes me wonder if it's the latter that he knew his time was nearing the end because he hasn't been in public view for a little bit here. Like he did a podcast for a minute, but you could tell just by hearing him,
Hmm.
he was struggling. He'd been sick for a minute. Um, but it's like if he knew that his time was winding down relatively quickly. This is the kind of man that he was, and this is how he booked too. This was how he wrote storylines. There was always that cliffhanger, you
Hmm.
know, to entice people to tune in next week. Well, bitch, there ain't no more next week. So now what are you going to tell us? Please tell me if this was real. He either told somebody or he wrote it
Wrote it
down.
down.
Something,
Yes.
something.
Oh, that's gonna be something I watch for. And like I was saying before we started, like when I watched as a kid, he was actually one of my favorite wrestlers. Like,
Mm.
and I would say my other favorite wrestler when I was a kid was Michael Hayes. I loved him, but
He
he was
was
gorgeous.
he was fantastic.
Yeah,
He was the epitome of a professional wrestler in that day.
yeah,
Michael P.S. Hayes.
yep,
Yep.
loved him. Um, but yeah, like he was one of my favorites, and that was one of the things. Like he always kept fans and wrestling fans like, shit, we gotta watch now.
Right. Like what in the hell is he going to do now? What's
Yeah,
what's next? Dot dot dot. That
yep,
was Kevin Sullivan's booking practices. So that's why
yep.
we were sitting there. Sean, Brian, and Q and I were sitting there and like, what if he just worked all of us right to the very end? Because that could be a thing, but it's sensitive enough to where you're like, motherfucker, if you know something, you better be saying something.
Spill it.
For real. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
that would be something to hear in the near future of, was he just giving
was he
everyone a
working this?
mind
Is this
fuck,
bullshit? You're right.
or is there something that, and what makes me wonder, and this is, we talked about this before, in my trying to get ready for this and looking things up, I had found a podcast that Kevin Sullivan was on of Jim Cornette. I think it's called the Jim Cornette Experience.
Yes, ma'am.
And I started listening and I'm like, oh my God, he's still a whiny bastard. Jim Cornette, not Kevin
Right.
Sullivan. And thankfully YouTube has the transcript. So I just like scrolled through that. And when I finally got onto that, and I didn't get to hear the whole thing, but like he had said, like he didn't do Dark Side of the Ring because he wanted basically the okay from Nancy's parents to speak on it or whatever. And apparently the sister had told him or said something that she said the parents said it was okay, but he said I didn't hear directly. And he names her parents by name. I didn't hear directly from them, so I just didn't do it. Which kind of got to give him some respect for that, because he maybe could have came on and talked some major shit about both of them.
Yeah.
Um,
And in some regards, would have had every right to do so,
yeah. Oh, for sure.
even though he kind of opened that door. But
Right. He wrote it himself, really.
right, I mean, God, just the irony, the different layers of irony with all of this,
Yeah.
and even though probably more than likely he didn't have anything to do with the ultimate tragedy, but God damn, if he knows something and it winds up just turning that whole thing upside down.
Yeah.
Number one, me being like, I don't believe anything I hear and only half of what I see. You
Right.
know, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I'd be like, could you at least made it make sense?
Yeah.
So
Like, give us a
that's
little bit more so we can figure it out.
right.
Something. Yeah, that would be. But yeah, he talked basically like that was why, and how they were pretty much already separated. He was in one home that they owned, she was in another, and really hadn't seen each other for a while, except for, you know, through work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like more on a personal level. Um, but I can't say, and again, I didn't watch or listen to the whole thing because it's just basically a cartoon in the background. There's no actual picture
Yeah.
of them speaking. Um, but basically, what I got from it, he really didn't have anything overly horrible to say about either one of them. He seemed to keep it very respectful. He talked about like her being fallen angel or dark angel
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, and you know him being the one to basically right the shit that happened. And of course, yeah, there's some anger and hurt there, and but I really didn't get to listen or hear all that I wanted to, because like he's got that Boston accent.
Yeah.
So that's um I would have liked to listen to the whole thing, and I probably will still continue to listen to it because I don't think I've actually closed it out on my phone. I've just, my phone's sleeping, but I do want to listen to the whole thing because you kind of want to hear it from his words, but like hearing it from him, and then the fact that Nancy in 2003 did file and then withdraw a petition of divorce and a restraining order against
Yeah.
Chris Benoit, kind of.
I had forgotten to mention that part, and that is a very important part of the story. Um, and it really feeds into, this is a very logic. This is probably what happened, because a lot of the and back then too, roid rage, the steroids were being blamed for a lot of his behaviors at that time. And I had forgotten about that she had filed and then and withdrew from that. So it's hmm, yeah,
Yeah, so you kind of put those together, and it's like, you hate to think it because everyone does talk of him so highly, like how much he loved his son. Um, and to hear his older son speak about how close they were
yeah.
and things like that. And it does seem unbelievable that he could have followed through with and did that. And, you know, and like I was talking a little bit, I kind of didn't read the entire thing, but kind of peeped at the autopsies and the fact that she had bruises because, his knee would have been in her back while he was strangling and things like that. It's hard to think of that and hear how everyone spoke so highly of him as a husband and a father.
It's it's just that's that's the mind fuck part of it. Because
Yeah.
anytime you saw him or saw them out in public, he looked on the surface the adoring husband and the doting father, and he took that kid was in the ring with him when he won the world title, and like they just really on the surface looked like a happy family,
Yeah.
and just goddamn, the autopsy reports were especially difficult, because you spend so much time watching this man do this one activity, this one sport.
Hmm.
You know what his facial expressions are. You know how he moves his body when he's doing one move or the other. You see what I'm saying? And when you're
Yep.
reading the autopsy and they're kind of piecing together what the scene probably looked like, you as a fan can visualize in great detail what that looked like. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
a mind fuck. You know what I mean? Like his face probably looked like this. And this is how his arms were positioned. So that's the aspect not a lot of people talk about. They're like, oh man, you're creepy. No, I'm not the only one that thinks about this. You see what I'm
Right. Right.
saying? And it just adds another layer of, especially, especially with Daniel.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this, but or put it like this, because nobody should die in the way that either one of them did.
Right.
But I wouldn't have as strong personal feelings, and I know this enough about myself, if he had just focused on Nancy and left Daniel the fuck alone.
Right. I mean, it's still horrible.
Yeah,
It's still
absolutely.
absolutely
I am not
horrible.
dismissing that. Yes.
But to take your special needs son, who was what, seven,
Yeah.
6 or 7, and drug him and then strangle him. That's got to be. I mean, at any point, like, did he tell himself to stop? I mean, obviously he didn't, but it's
You know,
crazy.
it seems like, especially with the placement of the Bibles,
Mm,
this was premeditated. He had thought about this for a while. I don't know if he had specific scriptures in there that were highlighted or marked out in some way or the other. I don't know anything about that, but why
yeah,
why
and
put
that would
Bibles
actually
next to
be
him?
interesting to have someone like look through and analyze like what scriptures or passages or whatever that he may have highlighted
Mm-hmm.
or things like that. And honestly, thinking about it, like after they did, do the looking at his brain and all of that stuff. Um, I want to say that was like the first time I had ever heard of CTE. I don't know what the actual words for it are. I just know CTE because that's easy to memorize.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I want to say like the other big sports celebrity that they really, I mean, obviously many have had it, but Aaron Hernandez.
Right. Yeah.
And it's,
And look what the shit he went. What he did. You
yeah.
know. There's a lot of evidence that support, especially now with all this technological advances that we have in especially in the medical field. But
Mm,
you know, like I said, we didn't know nearly as much about concussions and the effects on the brain that things like that have back then, like we do now.
mm,
And that's why you don't see those unprotected chair shots to the head, and you're not seeing pile drivers done much anymore. In the wrestling business, football is going above and beyond trying to come up with different protection for these players to protect their brains. Um, Benoit, Aaron Hernandez, these are very high profile cases that resulted in the absolute ultimate worst case scenario. How
mm-hmm.
many other people are suffering from this, responding and reacting to it? Maybe not quite on that level, but
Right.
it's still bad, you know. And again, I'm not dismissing Benoit for being a monster for doing what he did. Um, but there's a reason, and we just got to figure out what that reason is. Us as wrestling fans, we most of us have conceded the fact that the man and the wrestler were not the same,
No.
and so while I can appreciate what he brought to the business, I condemn his actions as a man. I
Oh,
condemn him to
absolutely.
hell.
Absolutely. And I just keep coming back to, and there's a couple cases that I've done where the father has, but I think he's the first one. I mean, not the first one, but like the first one that we've done on the show that he has actually ended his. And, they say that's usually how like the family annihilators, what they do is their end game is they end themselves too. Now the other cases I've done, they didn't. Um, but I mean, it's still horrific. Again, if you want to kill yourself, yeah, people are going to be sad and suffer and all that stuff. But damn, why do you got to take out innocent people?
Right,
And the
right.
one case I did, he said he did it because after confessing to his wife he was having an affair, she supposedly had said, "Well, I'm leaving, and you're never going to see the girls again." So you kill them? Like what? So like it makes me wonder: was there an argument? Did she say, "We're leaving, you're done," kind of thing?
That's been speculated too.
And that was his way of saying, "You're not going anywhere," kind of thing. I mean, again, I don't know. Um, and then again, how much did the steroids play? How much did the CTE play? I'm going to say probably quite a bit in those actions because, again, everyone talks about him as such this wonderful husband, father. Um, David talks about he's my hero. Like, yeah, what he did sucks, but he's still my hero. And I get that perspective. I
Hmm.
get it. It's still your dad. It's got to be hard for him.
I can't
But
imagine.
like what the fuck happened prior to that made him snap in that way?
You just worded that in such a way where, as you were laying this out, I'm like, man, there's aspects of this, there's aspects of that, there's a little piece of this, there's a sprinkle of that. The next thing you talk about steroids, the CTE, which turns into roid rage if there's problems with the marriage, which had been speculated. with the filed for the petition for divorce withdraw. Did something else happen during that weekend that made him snap?
Mhm.
Because there was speculation that there was problems within the marriage. You take a little bit of this and that and another thing. The next thing you know, you have a recipe or a potpourri for disaster, and this is exactly what has happened here.
Yeah.
And they've talked about making movies about this guy. They've talked about a number of different things, but it seems like as soon as it gets the green light, I don't know if it's WWE, I don't know if it's some other entity, but something always throws a wrench in the works.
Right.
They went so far as to cast the dude that was going to play him, and like they were moving forward with this. And it was called, it was going to be called crossface or something like that, that tied into one of his finishing maneuvers. Like they were ready to start rolling, and then the plug got pulled
Hmm.
inexplicably. So what the fuck is happening with this story, and who is the puppet master that doesn't want this story told,
Right.
or that version of it, or whatever the case may be?
Right.
Because I
And
still feel like there's a lot of question marks here.
oh, a lot. But it makes me wonder if is it like Vince McMahon or is it maybe the families?
Hmm. I feel like in this aspect, it would be more of the families, because I mean Vince did what Vince did. Like he's done as much as he can to um, put distance between what was his company, WWE, and Chris Benoit. He
Mhm.
took his name out of the fucking history books.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, there's no more that man can do other than actually going in and pulling every piece of footage off the WWE network that has Chris Benoit in it. You're not going to do that. That's why you put the disclaimer up.
Right.
Um, but god damn, man, it's everybody is so focused. Like there's got to be that. This is the answer. We got to have that definitive. This is what it is,
Yeah.
and
And
you're
you know
just
what?
not
There
going to get it.
honestly, there's a lot of cases that are like that. That there's something missing. That the person sitting in prison, and there's one case in particular, and it happened in 2018, and I have been obsessed ever since. The Chris Watts case. I briefly covered that, and I've watched so many things and read so many different books that I didn't even have notes for it. Like I just word vomited everything. Um, and there's still aspects of that case. Like I think, like he had a mistress. I think the mistress helped, but because he pled guilty, they stopped investigating, and boom, there's more to it. And
Hmm.
I agree with the Benoit case. I think it's the same thing. There's got to be something.
Yeah, we're not being told the whole story.
Mm-mm.
I don't feel like just just based solely on the interviews and shit that I've seen with the investigators that were at the house when that weekend that they went in there, the first responders, what they saw. That's the other kind of creepy thing, is to see the police photos of inside the house and what the house looked like in those days. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. Like I saw those pictures the first time, and I just had such a weird feeling. There was just such a weird aura to
Mm-hmm.
the still pictures that I'm looking at through a fucking screen. I have no personal tie to this human whatsoever, other than I was a fan of his work at the time. So why the fuck am I feeling chills when I'm looking at these pictures? What the shit is going on? What happened in that house
Right.
on the weekend of June 24th of 2007? What the fuck happened?
Right.
Somebody knows something. And if Kevin Sullivan knew something, that's going to put this whole thing, it's going to open it right back up.
right.
And this is where you're going to start seeing the movies.
Yeah. And I really hope he wasn't just talking out of his ass just to fuck with people. I really hope he did know something and he wrote it down or told someone, or maybe he's got a little manuscript for a book he's that's going to come out after, you know, a certain amount of time after his death. I don't know. It's definitely interesting. And I mean, that's definitely something I'm going to keep my ears open for.
Absolutely. I'm here for it.
If that happens, we're going to have, no matter how much time has passed, we're going to have to do a part two.
Well, the good news is, Jill, is I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So whenever that does materialize, if that does materialize, you got my number. You know how to get a hold of me. I'm not hard to find.
Yeah.
So I at least do this shit once a week. No, it's I spend more time in this chair,
Oh,
between this chair and on the assembly line than anything else. I'm not bitching. That's just the way it is right now.
yeah, I can definitely imagine. I know I talked to my daughter about like doing one with me, and I'm thinking, I'm on vacation this week. This is going to be the week for me to sit down and get a couple in so that it'll be easier when I'm back to work to deal with scheduling issues with anybody. So,
Nothing
yeah.
wrong with putting a couple episodes in the can for a rainy day. You know,
Yep.
I've got shit in the can. I forgot I recorded. I have to go back and listen to it and figure out, because I didn't label them or nothing. It just says canned episode. So it could be there's a couple of them. I look at the date. I'm like, oh, I don't really want to know if I want to hear what that can of worms sounds like right now, just because of the time frame.
Yeah.
I don't know. But on the other hand, it's like, that was a fun little glimpse back into the future. Speaking of Back to the Future, we're going to have to get you back on power tripping through the '80s here pretty quick.
Let
That
me
was a
know.
fun
I know there
episode.
was one of the episodes, I don't remember which one now, where Sean had made a mention about like no one liked the KMF episode. I'll tell you what, I was at work listening to that, laughing my ass off when you guys did that one. So like I'd be game for something like that because that would be fucking hilarious.
I'm gonna make a note of that right this second.
All right.
Because I'll be honest with you, that was one of my favorite episodes too. That was a fun episode, and I don't know why people took such exception to it.
I
I mean,
don't
it's
know
a little
either.
raw, but I mean, what the fuck on this network isn't raw?
Right,
You
there
know what
there
I mean?
is there is the, little warning, rated M for mature beforehand.
That's
If
what
you
it's there for.
if you can't handle it, press pause and go watch Barney. I don't know.
Bluey will be on in a half an hour, I'm sure, on some network. That motherfucker's all over the place now. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no,
But
that one I did. Like my driver's walking or riding by with parts, just looking at me like, "What the fuck is wrong with her? What is she on?" I was laughing hysterically during that. A couple parts I had to rewind because I missed it. That shit was funny.
I thought so too. Yeah, we will definitely, like, I'm down for that, So yeah, we'll make that happen. We'll try to make that happen this week while you're off.
All
So
right.
we'll see what happens here. I'll get with Sean, and because he started a new job, his schedule is kind of on shifting sand right now. So once he gets a better idea, then we'll be able to put some shit down on paper and be like, all right, we're bringing Jill on, and this is what we're going to do, and buckle up.
Sounds good. That sounds like a plan.
Also, real quick, if you are in the market for any cool merchandise with the Creepy Soup logo or designs on it, they are actually the first to get their own link to their own store from our online store provider. So you will be able to go to pfccreepysoup.printify.me, and I'm going to put a link in the description The page is up, and we are transferring all of the designs that are on the PFC store, the main store, to send over to the Creepy Soup. So if you don't give a shit about the hot tag, or we don't talk about that, or Power Trip through the 80s, or Klaus of the Heart, and all you want is Creepy Soup stuff, you will have a one-stop shop for everything that has Jill and Jenny and Dan's names, faces, logos, all of it is going to be over there. One more time, pfccreepysoup.printify.me, or go to pfcnetwork.net for all the latest information across the board in this vast universe that we call the Pure Fury Creations Entertainment Network. This was a fun episode. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it. I'm sorry I took it over.
That's okay. That's honestly what I was hoping for, because I know in this area you're definitely way more knowledgeable. I Like I said, in this case, I heard about it when it came out. Of course, Dark Side of the Ring. And then I was trying to look through things today. But definitely glad you took over the reins for this one. Thank you for making the time to fill in. Um, Truly, truly appreciate that. And like I've said before, all you do for the network. Um, yeah, definitely. When Kevin Sullivan's little secret drops.
I'll be back. Just no, listen. In all sincerity, it has been an absolute privilege to bring you and Jenny on board here,
Thank
and
you.
your show has really established its own presence here. You know, because we've got a number of different shows under our umbrella, but what you guys do is something special. It's different. It's unique. I'm a fan of it. I love it. You guys are doing good work, and I'm privileged and I'm proud that you guys entrust me to produce the show, to put it out there, to take care of your merch and all that shit. Like I appreciate you guys
Thank you.
for
That's
allowing me to be a part of this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I know Jenny also appreciates that. We've talked about it a couple different times. We're like, damn, like this is amazing.
Well, we want to send a shout out to Jenny real quick, and we're sorry you weren't able to be here this week, um, but still very much on on our thought, our thoughts, our minds, and hope you're doing well. So just wanted to throw that out there. So I have nothing else unless there's something else you want to throw out there.
Nope, I think I'm good, because usually at some point I do try to throw out the store on there, and you covered that. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, one more time, pfccreepysoup.printify.me is your one-stop shop for all of the merchandise for this particular podcast. See, I don't even have my own store yet. And you guys wind up getting the first one, that the first the one that stands alone. So
That's
love that
funny.
for you. Who books this shit?
Someone's getting fired.
I'm fucking. I'm gonna kick somebody's ass. I haven't kicked anybody's ass in a while. I feel like I'm overdue. It's
Yeah,
probably part of my fucking problem, but be that as it may. All right, we'll get out of here this week. We appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm just gonna go ahead and take us out of here, Jill. Thanks.
that's fine.
All right, tune in next Sunday for another episode of Creepy Soup here on the PFC Entertainment Network.